Welcome to my channel, Old Coins Quarter Dollar. Here you'll find videos about rare, valuable, and interesting coins from around the world. Watch the videos, learn about coin history, coin values, and unique facts you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. It really helps us grow and bring you even more amazing coin content. Thanks for watching. Let's get started. The 1948 British 2 shillings coin belongs to the reign of King George VI, who was a father of Queen Elizabeth II and the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom and the British Commonwealth from 1936 until his death in 1952. His coinage reflects a complex transition of the British Empire in the mid-20th century. As the Second World War had recently ended in 1945, the empire was beginning to experience decolonization, and Britain was economically strained yet still trying to preserve traditional symbols of sovereignty and continuity. The florin, or 2 shillings piece, had been introduced as part of Britain's currency reforms a century earlier in 1849 during Queen Victoria's reign, originally conceived as 1/10 of a pound sterling in preparation for possible decimalization, though decimalization itself would not occur until 1971. By 1948, the coin had become a familiar denomination, circulating widely and valued at 2 shillings, which was equivalent to 1/10 of a pound or 24 pence in the old pre-decimal system. The obverse of the 1948 2 shillings coin depicts the portrait of King George VI facing left, designed by the engraver Thomas Humphrey Paget, whose initials HP often appear discreetly below the bust. Paget's effigy of George VI is characterized by a strong, clean profile with a well-defined jawline, short hair, and an expression that conveyed both dignity and restraint, qualities sought after in post-war Britain where stability and authority were needed. Surrounding the portrait is a legend in Latin, Georgius 6D GBRMN Rex Fide Defensa IND. This inscription expands to Georgius 6 Dei Gratia Britanniarum Omnium Rex, Fide Defensa, Indi Imperata, which translates to George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. However, this exact style of inscription was undergoing changes in the late 1940s. India gained independence in 1947, and thus, coins struck after 1948 gradually dropped the title INDMP, Emperor of India. Therefore, the 1948 issue is historically important, because it represents the very last period when the title Indi Imperata appeared on British coinage, marking the end of the British monarch's role as Emperor of India. Some coins from 1948 show slight variations in legend depending on the minting stage, making them historically significant transitional pieces. The reverse design of the coin is equally rich in symbolism. The reverse was designed by George Kruger Gray, a talented designer who contributed many heraldic and floral coin motifs for Britain and the Commonwealth. On the 1948 florin, his design displays a crown Tudor rose in the center, surrounded by a thistle, a shamrock, and a leek, which collectively represent the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Above the rose is a royal crown, symbolizing sovereignty and monarchy. Around the floral arrangement is the inscription FID Def IND IMP 2 shillings 1948, or some variant form depending on spacing and abbreviation, encircling the design. The Latin Fid Def is short for Fide Defensa, meaning Defender of the Faith, a title originally granted to Henry VIII by the Pope and retained by subsequent monarchs, though with Anglican rather than Catholic significance after the Reformation. The denomination 2 shillings appears clearly, making the coin easily identifiable in circulation, and the date 1948 situates it historically. The style is symmetrical, balanced, and clean, reflecting a restrained elegance typical of mid-20th century British numismatic art. The metal composition of the 1948 florin reflects the economic and material changes of the period. Earlier florins, minted before 1920, were made of sterling silver, 92.5% silver content. Between 1920 and 1946, they were debased to 50% silver, and after 1947, just 1 year before this coin was struck, they were made entirely from cupronickel, an alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Thus, the 1948 florin is one of the first full years of issue in cupronickel, which had a silvery appearance but no intrinsic precious metal content. This decision to remove silver entirely was taken because Britain, in the aftermath of World War II, needed to conserve silver reserves for trade and recovery. Therefore, the 1948 coin represents the new practical direction of British coinage: durable, affordable, and suited for mass production and daily circulation, though lacking the intrinsic bullion value of earlier issues. Collectors often note the distinct difference in luster between the earlier silver florins and the post-1947 cupronickel pieces, which tend to acquire a grayish tone with age. The size of the coin remained consistent with earlier florins, 28.5 millimeters in diameter, and weighing approximately 11.3 grams. The edge is milled reeded, a feature originally intended to prevent clipping or shaving of silver coins, though by 1948 it was largely a traditional design element retained for familiarity and tactile recognition. When struck in high grade, the cupronickel surface would exhibit a bright, almost chrome-like sheen, though circulation quickly dulled this. Minting quality during the late 1940s varied somewhat due to post-war industrial constraints, and thus some coins may show weaker strikes or uneven toning, details that collectors examine when grading specimens. Historically, the 1948 2 shillings coin exists at a pivotal moment in world history. The British Empire was shrinking, India had gained independence the previous year, and within a few years other colonies would follow. Domestically, Britain was under the Labour government of Clement Attlee, implementing sweeping social reforms such as the creation of the National Health Service. Everyday Britons would have used this florin to buy goods, travel, or pay for ration foodstuffs still under strict post-war control. 2 shillings represented a useful mid-value coin in daily commerce, worth around 1/10 of a pound, or the equivalent of about £5 in modern terms when adjusted for inflation and purchasing power. This means it was not a trivial coin but an important denomination in circulation, heavily used in markets, shops, and daily wages. In terms of numismatic value today, the 1948 florin is not especially rare, as many were struck for circulation, with mintage figures reaching into the tens of millions. However, its historical context, its place as one of the last coins to bear the INDIMP title, and its representation of the change to non-silver alloys give it enduring interest among collectors. Well-preserved examples in uncirculated or proof-like condition can command a premium, especially when the luster is intact and the details of the crowned rose and surrounding flowers remain sharp. Circulated coins, on the other hand, are still relatively common and affordable, making them an accessible entry point for collectors of British pre-decimal coinage. The 1948 2 shillings coin is thus not merely a piece of metal but a reflection of its age, a symbol of Britain's monarchy, its heraldic traditions, its economic struggles. The 1948 1 shilling coin of the United Kingdom sits at a crossroads of British numismatic history. It was struck during the reign of King George VI, the father of Queen Elizabeth II, who ascended the throne unexpectedly in 1936 after the abdication of his elder brother Edward VIII. By 1948, George VI was 12 years into his reign, and Britain was emerging from the shadow of the Second World War. This was a difficult time for the nation, marked by post-war austerity, rationing, and the slow rebuilding of infrastructure and morale. In such times, coinage often reflects both continuity and change, continuity in the traditional titles and designs that link the monarchy to centuries of history, and change in the materials, symbolism, and inscriptions that respond to shifting political realities. The 1948 shilling captures both sides of this narrative. On the obverse, the coin bears a portrait of George VI, facing left, engraved by Thomas Humphrey Paget, H.P. This effigy is known for its dignified simplicity. The king is shown bareheaded, without crown or laurel wreath, his profile firm and serious. Paget had been commissioned to create the likeness early in George VI's reign, and his design became one of the most widely circulated depictions of the king across the empire. The choice of a bareheaded portrait reflected both modesty and the austerity of the era, as well as a break from more ornate or idealized depictions of monarchs in earlier centuries. Surrounding the portrait is the obverse inscription in Latin, Georgiv 6D Bearum and Rex Fide Defensa Indiae Imperata. Expanded, this means George VI, by the grace of God, King of all the Britons, Defender of the Faith, Emperor of India. The titles here are a direct continuation of centuries of English and British monarchical tradition. DG stand for Dei Gratia, by the grace of God, affirming divine right. Bromnrex means King of all the Britons, a formulation that encapsulates not only England, Scotland, and Ireland, but also the dominions of the Crown. Fid Def, or Fide Defensor, dates back to Henry VIII, who was granted the title Defender of the Faith by the Pope, and who kept it even after breaking from Rome. Finally, INDIMP stands for Indi Imperata, or Emperor of India, a title first adopted by Queen Victoria in 1877 at the height of empire. By 1948, however, this title was in flux. India had achieved independence in 1947, yet coins still bore the imperial style for a brief period before it was removed. Thus, the 1948 issue is one of the last British coins to feature the phrase INDIMP, making it a transitional relic of a fading empire. The reverse design of the 1 shilling coin in 1948 is particularly fascinating because it actually existed in two distinct types, the English reverse and the Scottish reverse. This duality reflected the union of England and Scotland within the United Kingdom, with each nation represented by its own heraldic emblem on alternating shilling issues. The English reverse, designed by George Kruger Gray, features a crowned lion standing on top of a crown, with the inscription FID Def 1 shilling 1948 encircling the design. The lion is a long-standing heraldic symbol of England, representing bravery, authority, and sovereignty. The crown upon which the lion stands symbolizes a monarchy itself, and the pairing creates an image of strength and legitimacy. The Scottish reverse, also by Kruger Gray, depict a crowned lion rampant within a double treasure floor counterflory, holding a sword and scepter surmounted by the crown of Scotland. This design proudly asserted Scotland's distinct identity within the United Kingdom. The use of two reverses on the same denomination was unique to the shilling, and continued throughout much of the 20th century. Collectors often distinguish between the two types, and both were struck in 1948, providing variety for numismatists and reflecting the dual national identity enshrined in Britain's coinage. The denomination inscription is prominently shown on the reverse as 1 shilling. The shilling was a cornerstone of the pre-decimal system, valued at 12 pence or 1/20th of a pound sterling. It was widely used in everyday commerce, and in 1948 it retained significant purchasing power. 1 shilling could buy essentials such as a pint of milk, a loaf of bread, or even contribute toward tram or bus fare. It was a coin of the common people, essential to daily life, and thus the 1 shilling coin carried both practical and symbolic weight. To millions of Britons, it was a familiar object of trust, stability, and continuity amid the upheavals of post-war life. In terms of metal composition, the 1948 shilling was struck in cupro-nickel rather than silver. This was a crucial turning point in British coinage. Up until 1920, shillings were minted in sterling silver, 92.5% silver. From 1920 to 1946, the content was reduced to 50% silver. However, after the Second World War, the government made the decision to remove silver entirely from circulating coins, beginning in 1947. This was due to both economic necessity and the need to conserve precious metals in a period of financial strain. As such, the 1948 shilling is composed of an alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a bright silvery appearance but no intrinsic precious metal value. The weight was approximately 5.65 grams, with a diameter of 23.5 millimeters and a milled edge. The shift from silver to cupro-nickel was controversial at the time, as many lamented the loss of intrinsic value, but the government argued it was necessary to modernize the coinage system and ensure long-term stability. The mintage of the 1948 1 shilling was substantial, as Britain needed large quantities of coinage for circulation in the post-war economy. Millions of both the English and Scottish reverse types were struck, ensuring that the coin was plentiful in everyday use. As a result, it is not considered rare today, but its historical importance makes it highly collectible. Circulated examples are common and affordable, often showing where on the king's portrait or the lion and crown details. However, well-preserved uncirculated specimens with full luster are more desirable, especially when both reverse types are collected as a pair. Proofs and high-grade strikes from this period are especially attractive, as a cupro-nickel alloy could produce a bright, almost chrome-like finish when fresh. The historical context of 1948 add considerable depth to this coin story. Britain was recovering from the devastation of war, with rationing still in effect for essentials such as bread, meat, and clothing. The Labour government under Clement Attlee was transforming the nation with sweeping social reforms, including the establishment of the National Health Service in 1948. At the same time, Britain's global role was diminishing. India, the jewel in the crown, had gained independence in 1947, and other colonies would soon follow. The appearance of INDIMP on the coin's legend in 1948 was therefore somewhat anachronistic, as the title no longer reflected political reality. By 1949, the legend would be changed to drop INDIMP, marking symbolic acknowledgement of decolonization. Thus, the 1948 shilling belongs to a fleeting moment when the coinage still bore the full imperial titles, yet the empire itself was visibly contracting. The 1980 Hong Kong $1 coin is a striking representation of both colonial authority and local identity, a monetary artifact from a time when Hong Kong was still under British sovereignty. Issued during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, this coin embodies a dual identity of Hong Kong as a vital trading hub in Asia and a crown colony governed by the United Kingdom. The coin's date, 1980, places it in a period of significant economic growth for Hong Kong, which was rapidly transforming into one of the world's leading financial centers. At the same time, subtle tensions about sovereignty were already present, as a question of Hong Kong's future would soon be addressed in the Sino-British negotiations of the early 1980s. Thus, the coin is not merely an object of currency but also a silent witness to an era of profound change. On the obverse of the coin, the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II dominates the field, facing to the right as was customary in British numismatic tradition, where successive monarchs alternate the direction of effigies. The design used on Hong Kong's coins in this period was the effigy created by Arnold Machin, one of the most distinguished coin portraitists of the 20th century. This portrait, introduced in 1964 for British and Commonwealth coinage, depicts a queen with a youthful yet dignified expression, wearing the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, one of her most iconic jeweled adornments. Machin's effigy was renowned for its clarity and grace, capturing Elizabeth II in a refined, almost timeless manner, which contrasted with the sterner portraits used later in her reign. The detailing of the hair, the diadem, and the profile is particularly crisp on higher-grade strikes, and even circulated pieces often retain a sense of elegance. Surrounding the portrait is the inscription Queen Elizabeth II, written in clear, evenly spaced Roman capital letters. Unlike the more complex Latin legends found on coins struck in the United Kingdom, Hong Kong coinage used plain English inscriptions, which made them accessible to both the English-speaking administrators and the largely Cantonese-speaking population who used the coins in daily life. This inscription reinforced the sovereignty of the monarch over Hong Kong, while simultaneously presenting her identity in a form that did not require classical knowledge to decipher. The simplicity of the wording, her name and regnal title alone, underscored the pragmatic approach of colonial administration in Hong Kong, balancing respect for tradition with the needs of practical circulation. The reverse of the 1980 Hong Kong $1 coin features a powerful symbol of the colony itself, the lion, standing proudly and crowned with a royal crown. This heraldic lion had long been a symbol of British authority, drawn from the royal arms of England, but in Hong Kong it carried additional meaning. The lion had been incorporated into the colonial coat of arms granted in 1959, which displayed a lion holding a pearl and another lion supporting a shield with the image of a Chinese junk and a crown. The lion on the coin, rendered in bold detail, was therefore both a symbol of Britain's enduring authority and a nod to Hong Kong's unique colonial identity. Beneath the lion's feet is a date 1980, marking the year of minting, while the denomination $1 is inscribed prominently, ensuring clarity for everyday transactions. The reverse inscriptions also included Chinese characters, another important feature that reflected Hong Kong's cultural duality. The characters Yuan, meaning $1, appear in a strong, traditional style of script. Their inclusion ensured that the coin could be immediately understood by the majority Cantonese-speaking population, who might not otherwise recognize or trust an English-only inscription. This bilingual presentation of value was one of the most distinctive features of Hong Kong's colonial coinage, symbolizing the coexistence, though unequal, of British and Chinese cultures under colonial rule. It also reflected practical necessity. A coin that could not be understood by the common people would not serve its role in commerce. The balance of English and Chinese inscriptions gave Hong Kong's coinage a unique visual identity compared to other British colonial issues. The composition of the 1980 Hong Kong $1 coin also tells an important economic story. By this time, the coin was struck in a cupro-nickel alloy made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Earlier issues of the Hong Kong dollar in the 19th century have been made in silver, reflecting both the metallic standards of the age and the importance of silver in Chinese trade networks. However, as the 20th century progressed and silver became increasingly impractical for circulating coinage, base metal alloys were adopted instead. By 1980, cupro-nickel provided the necessary durability and affordability for mass circulation, while still giving the coin a silvery appearance that inspired trust and familiarity. The coin weighed 7.1 grams and had a diameter of 25.5 millimeters, with a milled, reeded edge, a design element that helped deter counterfeiting and clipping while also giving the coin a tactile feel. In terms of circulation value, the Hong Kong $1 coin of 1980 occupied an important middle tier of the currency system. At the time, the Hong Kong dollar was pegged loosely against other major currencies, and one Hong Kong dollar was worth about 1/8 of a British pound, or roughly US 20 cents. A single dollar coin could purchase small items, a tram ride, or street food, and thus it had daily significance to the people of Hong Kong. Unlike lower denominations such as the 10 or 20 cent pieces, which were often overlooked or hoarded, the dollar coin was a common and practical unit of money that circulated heavily. Its sturdy composition ensured it could withstand years of use in the bustling markets, restaurants, and shops of Hong Kong, a city that thrived on rapid economic exchange. The political context of 1980 makes this coin especially poignant in hindsight. Though the coin still bore the proud effigy of Elizabeth II and the crowned lion of British authority, by this year the question of Hong Kong's sovereignty was already on the horizon. Just 2 years later, in 1982, negotiations between Britain and China would begin, culminating in the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration that set the stage for the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China. Thus, the 1980 issue belongs to one of the last decades when Hong Kong coinage fully reflected its colonial identity without reference to the impending transition. For numismatists today, this imbues a coin with a sense of historical transition. It represents Hong Kong at the height of its colonial prosperity, yet just before the countdown to change began. From a numismatic perspective, the 1981 dollar coin is not rare, as millions were struck for circulation. Most examples survive in circulated condition, often showing wear on the Queen's portrait or smoothing of the lion's finer details. Uncirculated or proof-like examples, however, are significantly more collectible, especially as part of complete sets of Hong Kong coinage from the Elizabeth II era. Collectors value the coin both for its design and its historical context, and though its base metal composition means it carries no intrinsic bullion value, its cultural and historical significance make it an important collectible. The contrast between the Western obverse and the bilingual reverse is O's.